Hi, hello, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the first webinar of HiveMQ for 2025. First of all, Happy New Year to everyone. I hope everyone is doing great. And I am very excited to be here today to talk about some of the industrial data management trends that we are seeing we actually saw in 2024 and what we will actually look forward to in 2025. And I'm here and I'm also very, very happy to also do this with Gaurav Suman, who is the Director of Product Marketing in HiveMQ. Gaurav, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, Ravi, and happy to be here. We are here for the community. We wanted to make sure we can share some really interesting results which have come out of this survey, and no better person to be doing this with other than Ravi. So, Ravi, I mean, your credentials perhaps lead very little introduction. As for me, I lead product marketing here at Hive MQ. Been with the company about 3 years. I'm based out of Ottawa, Canada, where it is minus 26 Celsius this morning. So the weather is cold, but this room is going to be very warm. Bring in all your questions. I will be, by the way, sort of your proxy for questions for Ravi. And Ravi, for those of you who haven't seen his face before, very unlikely, but he's out there, talking to industry specialists. He's one of our in-house resident experts on all things manufacturing. So, Ravi, with that, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Gaurav, and very, very kind of you. And again, just to quickly introduce myself, I'm the Director of Industry Solutions Manufacturing for HiveMQ. So I am kind of like the specialist for smart manufacturing for HiveMQ, and I have 7 to 8 years of experience in the manufacturing field as in the IoT aspect and data analytics and understanding manufacturing systems. So with that, let's go to the so I Gaurav already talked about like what we are trying to do. So we actually did a survey along with IIoT World in late 2024, and based on that, the survey results that came out, we prepared a report, and the report just released this morning, and I'm very very excited about that. We have links to that available for you to download as well, and this is the report. And basically, what it is it's like it's something that we sponsor working with IIoT World, and so they actually do the survey on our behalf with their community members. And the goal is to kind of like gather insights on how companies are adopting IoT technologies, what challenges they face, what benefits they achieve, how they are actually tackling the world of AI, because that's become very, very prevalent now. How are they enabling those AI experiences with data management, and what some of the benefits are, for example, of unified namespace and other data frameworks that enable doing like AI and other things. So the survey had about 450 or so respondents, and the results were very, very, very interesting. And so we have a blog and a report as well, which you can the links are here, and you can download that as well. And what I understand is like all the participants today will also get the report emailed to them. With that, Gaurav, you want to take over this?
Yeah, absolutely, Ravi. And this, I think, is one of the consistent questions that's been in the survey for the last couple of years, also, right? And and you can see the contrast here. There is there is a huge proportion of respondents who say they are already implementing IIoT strategy, and
Mhm.
we'll talk about what strategy means. Why does the word IIoT strategy even exist, or the phrase IIoT strategy even exist? But what's also interesting for us, the reality that almost a third of the respondents, and these are people who are not arbitrarily responding, right? This is somebody who's interested, who have a stake in choosing to evaluate IIoT strategy. They are still researching. And what that means is that companies which have already sort of taken the first steps on that journey, and others in the middle here, so almost 70% of the market is on that journey. And if I may, right, I was just thinking about this more deeply, right? When people think about strategy, what do they think about? And I was going back to this book which our CEO Dominic, he quite loves, actually, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. It opens with this little snippet on strategy. It says the basic idea of strategy is the application of strength against weakness, or if you prefer, strength applied to the most promising opportunity. And we'll see some responses up ahead, which speak to this idea. But I find it quite fascinating that despite 70% of the market already, um, you know, taking steps, there's still a fair number which is holding back. How about you, Ravi? I mean, when you're out there, talking to people at
Mhm.
at events, panels, etc. What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Yeah, yeah. So much very, very similar stories, right? I mean, everybody's thinking about IIoT, whether they're actively doing it or not. But maybe before we even jump into this, what is this IIoT? Because I think we need to kind of like set the definition, right? So the way we actually like did the survey, so basically what IIoT is, so you have like in the industrial world, you have like machines, you have systems, you have applications that are all doing certain things, right? In the industry 3.0 world, it was okay for these things to kind of like be on its own, especially like the OT systems were doing their things, IT systems were doing their things, no problem. Each of them were there for a purpose. Now, with the kind of like advent of computing, the better computing power, cloud computing, edge systems, which we will touch upon, there is actually like a chance that we can actually combine all of this data in a way that makes sense. So IIoT is like it's all about figuring out like how to break the data silos, how to bring the data together, how to create that data framework that enables all your advanced use cases that you want to achieve that are tied back to your whatever your strategy overall company strategy is. And this is where I think like one of the things that we also want to understand is data strategy. What is the data strategy and what is the general company strategy? So data strategy is something that needs to be aligned to what you want to achieve. Like, okay, if you want to achieve certain outcomes, like say in a factory, you want to have better outputs. You want to ensure that you improve, you reduce your downtime or increase your revenues or reduce costs, whatever that outcome needs to be. Then what sort of like data do you need? And what sort of policies do you need to put in place? What sort of governance do you need to have? What privacy practices do you need to have? So those kind of like fall under that whole data strategy umbrella that needs to be aligned with the company strategy. So it's very interesting that these results, at least 70%, are actually like looking into this at different levels, and 30% of them are still kind of still treading the waters, if you will, because they're not quite ready because they are so big and the company culture doesn't quite allow them to openly do this, but they're still kind of like treading waters. My guess is that this number would drastically increase, skew towards like people that are actually actively doing it, because if you don't do it, you'll be left behind.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the next one here. Here, let's talk about some of the challenges, Gaurav.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then, this is interesting, right? The leadership support. And this aspect is so key also because when we look at the results from ownership, how do our respondents feel around who needs to own this? There's such a
Hmm.
huge split, pretty much a 50-50 split or a 1:1 split between where the ownership sits. We look at that data in a little bit. But it's interesting that the sense is that we don't know where we are trying to go with this. We need direction. We need more leadership. Some of the other results around cybersecurity are no surprise, and they ought to be always some of the top concerns, and that's why when we are asking people to choose top two responses,
Right.
cybersecurity shows up. My belief is it will always be one of the two choices people make. So that's why that
Absolutely.
that long red bar doesn't surprise me. Um, but what's also interesting, Ravi, and I think we contrasted this data with some of the inputs we received last year.
Hmm.
The lack of skills is also showing up. People are realizing that there is something here to take action on, and then they are realizing that for us to take action, we lack the skill set. But it's a huge step ahead where you begin to now know there is a problem, or it's worth doing, but we can't take our next immediate step because we don't know how to, right? And that's sort of tied with a bit of the leadership outcome also that we are seeing here. Any
Yeah.
thoughts on this, Ravi?
Yes, like you correctly mentioned, Gaurav, if I remember correctly, the lack of budget and the uncertain ROI was actually like number three last year. But this time it's actually number four. So lack of skill actually has come ahead of it. And then in fact, integration of data sources is almost come close to that. So what this basically is saying is that people are springing into action, right? So they're not kind of like saying, yeah, you know what, I don't have budget, I don't have ROI, I don't want to do it. Instead, they are like, you know what, I need to do this. And as they do this, they are actually figuring out that they have lack of skills, there's knowledge gap, and also, hey, my data sources are kind of like all over the place. There's integration issues. So yes, while this is a problem, this is a good problem to have. So you're actually making the right moves. And also, if you can match that with the right ROIs, if you can have the right KPIs that you can track, if you will, like in manufacturing, it could be OEE, for example, or MTTR, mean time to repair, or MTBF, mean time between repairs, right? So those kinds of things, if you can track it and if you can prove value for like whatever you're trying to do, then that really gets you. So one of the numbers that we have in the report, we had it last year and this year, is that 80% of the IoT project fail because of A, maybe lack of leadership management support, B, because maybe the company culture doesn't allow it, C, maybe because the data is not quite there and they're not able to pull in the right resources to do it. ITOT doesn't like look eye to eye, a lot of those things. But the good news is that I think they are getting over that hump now and they're
Yeah.
actually looking at things that are happening based on that.
And Ravi, one other comment on this, right? And we are trying to obviously draw some inferences based on responses here.
Yeah.
I see there is a common thread that goes between sort of missing leadership and then again the lack of knowing what we are missing, right? So lack of knowledge. And then again,
Hmm.
that's linked with lack of budget and uncertain ROI, because this is where leadership needs to step in and help
Yes.
define, okay, what are we trying to solve here? What will it take? Who
Yes.
do we need to solve these problems? What kind of skills do we need, etc. So it's my belief is that, as and I know, Ravi, you spend a lot of your time at industry leadership forums,
Hmm.
Sesame and other places who are putting a voice out there in the market to say, guys, prepare for this new future ahead of you, right? And
Yes.
explain to your stakeholders, your shareholders, what
Yes.
what is it, the journey that you're trying to get onto. And I
No,
quite loved
absolutely.
how you contrasted the industry 3.0, 4.0 realities.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just so interesting to see how these are all
Yeah.
intertwined with.
Yeah. Yeah, talking about Sesame, just a quick plug for Sesame, right? I mean, they actually have a nice framework that allows you to come and take an audit of your current system to see where you are, where you are in your in the Industry 4.0 journey. What are some of the things that you're missing? And then like an action plan for where you want to get, right? What is that vision? What does good look like? What is the current state? What does good look like? And then, okay, what is the roadmap that you need? A very clearly documented process that allows you to do that. So they have that framework that's available as well.
Love it.
Okay. So I know you already alluded to it. So yeah, so this ownership.
Yeah, just one second. I'm going to drop a link in the chat because we mentioned Sesame. I just want to make sure people know who we are talking about here. So
Yes.
that's just some information on them.
Yep.
Yeah, Ravi, I mean, again, just on the back of what we saw previously, lack of leadership, or
Hmm.
perhaps confusion, or a degree of lack of alignment around leadership.
Yep.
Um, it's interesting to see this now, right? We are asking the question, okay, do you, dear respondent, have a good idea of the ownership on IIoT strategy? Who's going to
Hmm.
help achieve the KPIs or the promise of the KPIs? Now, I'm going to again pick up the book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, and quote something from here, and then I'll come back to this. So it says, yes, this nice and important to have differentiation around scale, scope, reputation, all of that is strategy. But what the
Hmm.
argument Richard Rumelt is making here is, he says, usually two things get missed out. One is having a coherent strategy, as in something which can help coordinate policies and actions, and we'll talk about that in a second here. And second
Hmm.
is the creation of new strengths through subtle shifts in viewpoint. So what we're talking about here is really unlocking intelligence, unlocking value across these different areas. And when you look at the wheel here, um, interestingly enough, the proportion who thinks executives should own the IIoT strategy, and the
Hmm.
second is a joint team between OTIT should own. It's almost the same number, right? So people
Yes.
believe that it needs either executive sponsorship or it needs a group to come together.
Hmm.
So almost half of this wheel, or rather more than half the wheel, believes it needs to come top down. It needs to be a shared understanding, a shared vision for this thing to move forward. I believe some of the people have been living through this pain. I mean,
Yes.
especially in the last year, I mean, in 2024, we've seen a lot of action on so many fronts of technology, software included. I think
Hmm.
this question is now being asked in organizations. So yeah, would love any of your reflections also on this, right? To me, this was a fascinating part that almost 50% or a little more than that is actually saying, let's come
Yeah.
together on this. Let's find the right people to lead us through this, uh,
Yeah.
on this journey.
Yeah. So to me, it's like what this basically says is that, I mean, technology, which is obviously all the things that IoT brings in, that's kind of like a means to an end, right? At the end of the day, there are three legs to this tool, if you will, right? The first leg is the people. The second leg is the process. Third leg is the technology. The people includes to a large part leadership. What does leadership want, if you will, right? What is the strategy? What are we trying to achieve as a company, if you will, right? And how does then translate to our people and our culture that we have within our organization? Whether people will be open to that, or what do we need to do from a training perspective? I think like the last slide we talked about lack of knowledge and things like that. So what are the knowledge gaps that we need to cover? And then we kind of like use that technology as that hook that then reaps or helps you reap the benefit of all of that, right? And that's when all these like the 80% of the IoT projects that fail, you'll actually be on the 20% side. And there is an interesting quote from McKinsey that we are actually using in our report, which basically says people and processes must shift to capture the benefits of the data-driven insights IoT can generate and maximize the technology's value. This requires commitment of the leadership to ensure that IoT is simply not an IT or an OT initiative, but rather an organization-wide initiative, which is exactly what this is all about, Gaurav.
No, perfect. And we have a question from Lehman or Lyman. Apologies if I'm saying your name wrong. We're gonna talk about this in a perhaps the next slide. I think just the variety of standards and what's going on there. Yeah, right on, Ravi. So yeah, let's look at this, right? And HTTP continues to be the winner for the last 3 years, I guess, right? And it's just point to point, request reply. It's just the reality of some of the systems talking to each other.
Right.
And the second is MQTT, and yes, MQTT is a standard. However, we have to remind ourselves this is more an architecture. So we are saying PubSub is the most preferred choice outside of the usual default obvious request reply fashion of HTTP. So really, the story should begin at MQTT to say this is um, the most prevalent. And the question here, if I may point your attention to that, is what do you use today? MQTT comes out tops, right? And that's something worth noting here.
Yeah.
Not because
Yeah.
of any other reason than the fact that it's providing flexibility and reliability and so on. And again, it's an open standard. There's a lot of reading available on that. But Ravi, any reflections on this? What you are seeing in the field with respect to this
Yes.
and the other options?
Yes, absolutely. Look, I mean, to me, yes, I mean, there is a lot of protocols, and obviously, MQTT is really gaining popularity when it comes to edge to enterprise or edge to cloud data transmission, exactly for the reasons that you mentioned. A, you don't need all of the data, right, to go to the enterprise. You need only specific data. And in the subsequent slides, we'll talk about edge computing and what that brings in and things like that, where decisions can be taken more at the edge rather than waiting for it to go to the cloud. So MQTT is that that conduit that enables you to bring the data in a very lightweight, very efficient in constrained environments, the required data that you need in specific topics, and share it with other systems that need it in an asynchronous or event-driven fashion, right? If you look at like OPCUA and Modbus, they're excellent protocols, and they're also definitely growing, but they are kind of like the machine to machine protocol or the communication that you need like when on premise where you need a lot of fields and a lot of information to share, right? Not all that information needs to go to the enterprise or the cloud. This is where I think MQTT is actually complementing a lot of what OPC does or a lot of what Modbus does to get that data from like Modbus and OPC. And we can talk about like HiveMQ and what we do also. We have this edge solution that can translate some of the data from Modbus or OPC and into MQTT topics, bring that onto the enterprise, and also bring that data back. Like, what about like if you want to like take the data that you have in the enterprise and then translate that back to OPC, right? That translation is also something that we can do as well.
Perfect. Okay, Ravi, we can move along.
Yeah.
By the way, there's a question which was pertinent to the last slide. Vince is asking, what would we be defining as an equipment? Which is that's like the physical endpoint, or what exactly are we referring to here?
Yeah, so to me, it's like, yes, the physical endpoint, right? I mean, it could be a PLC, it could be a controller, it could be a device that has a sensor on it. Yes, that's what we're referring to. It could be a combination of all of this, if you will, right? I mean, again, the definition of an equipment could be a subsystem as well. or an individual like a injection molding machine that could be an equipment, or like a PLC where multiple PLCs are connected to the same system. That all that could be like an equipment because it's doing something.
Right. Let's keep moving. And Vince, I hope that answered your question. In case not, just let us know in chat again. And ideally, if attendees don't mind, please put your questions in the Q&A section. Just helps us sort out the questions. We'll make sure to answer as many as we can. And if we miss something, we'll follow up, of course. But just to keep it easy on us to moderate the questions. Much appreciate your help there. Right, Ravi.
Yeah. Unified namespace, that is kind of like the talk of the town these days. Gaurav, do you want to?
100%. I mean, top of tongue, top of mind. I mean, there's just so much awesome work going on in this realm, right, of unified namespace,
Do we want
and
to
we've
kind of like
already.
quickly define that if you don't mind
Yeah,
for the
go for it, Ravi. Absolutely.
Yeah. So basically, like a unified namespace is a framework, data framework rather, that kind of like allows you to have all of the relevant data that you have within your business in a single location. It is edge driven, meaning like all of the information that you generate, close to the source of truth, and you can actually bring it in a very efficient manner to a centralized entity, if you will. That entity can then allow you to like look at all the information in a logical manner, and then it also and also the data is contextualized, which means like you have the context of where that particular data point is coming from. The data is normalized, it's cleansed, it's ready to be used in a format that you need it to support all of your advanced use cases like AI and ML, predictive maintenance, and things like that. Because the worst thing you can do is you can take your data and then dump it into like a data lake or like a data swamp, as some people like to call it. And then now you have like a project, and then your data scientist needs to go and pick the data, and they're like, you know what, this data is not even close to being ready. They have to spend 6 months to do some data engineering. That's the worst thing that can happen. This is what UNS avoids, and that's why it's gaining popularity. Go ahead, Gaurav.
No, love it. Thank you. No, so Ravi, I think again there is an interesting um, proportion of people we can see already, right? There are similar to the IIoT strategy thing, in this case, say about a quarter of the people
Mm-hmm.
or respondents to be more specific, who are in the industrial IoT domain or industry 4.0 domain. Excuse me, I shouldn't even say that. I make a lot of assumptions here as I speak about this. I should say people who have an interest in
Mm-hmm.
industrials technologies, right? Almost a quarter of them have not yet heard about the unified namespace, which is
Yeah.
which is fine, I guess. It's a concept which is shaping up rapidly. I must
Right.
point out,
Yeah.
um, and the eagerness to learn about unified namespace is high. And I think we are
Yes.
doing our little bit, and a lot of community leaders also are. We are doing our bit. We have published some guides, and Ravi,
Yes.
between yourself and Kudzai, he's one of the thought leaders in the space. There's a lot of good information out there. So what we'll do is we'll throw in a link
Yes.
in the chat so people can access.
Yeah.
But again, the same
Absolutely.
same idea as before. There's enough momentum in this direction, but still work in progress overall. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. One additional thing that I would like to throw in here is that obviously we talked about MQTT, and MQTT is a publicly subscribed, centralized entity, single source of truth. Now, one might ask, why do you need UNS if you already have MQTT, right? And this is where I think like we need to make sure that we make people understand what UNS brings on top of MQTT, right? MQTT is meant to be like you just there is no kind of like uh, you just like have data in topics, right? And then there is no real format to these topics. It's like straight. Whereas in the world of industrial, you need the context. If you're bringing in data from a particular subsystem, you need to know which subsystem the data is coming from, where in the subsystem the data is laid out. Almost like that ISA 95 model that kind of like defines how the data is organized in a factory floor, for example, right? That context is absolutely important. And that's obviously for the machine data, but also for other data, like process data or like other pieces of information that's coming from ERP or MES. You need that context. That's kind of like where UNS complements MQTT. It sits on top of MQTT and brings in that additional contextualization, the ability to model data and visualize data and things like that. So just wanted to add that.
No, love that, Ravi. And in fact, one of the things which you and I were talking about as we were preparing for this conversation was the fact that the unified namespace is edge driven.
Yes,
It's
correct.
it starts a journey at, or ideally it wants to extend and be interfacing with the actual action. So it's event driven. Anything which happens in the system, we need to be able to capture that. But then it's happening as close as possible to the
Yes,
edge, and
yes,
that gives the opportunity. And we'll look at some of the challenges that it then promises to solve, I guess. But the fact that you catch it at the edge, you have an opportunity to sort of reconcile data, organize data in a fashion which is standard, which can be read with systems upstream. And as you mentioned, MQTT plays its part in making sure the data can be
hmm
reliably,
hmm
securely, at scale, transmitted towards IT systems up in the cloud or elsewhere, right?
right.
That's just an interesting aspect. I thought I'll point out the fact that it's edge driven, right? Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. And Ravi, if I may just, I'm going to pace ourselves a little faster after this one, but unified namespace, right? It's not really a panacea, right? It's not to say, well, go, here's your UNS, and beginning tomorrow, life will look different. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
framework. At
it
the
is a
end of it,
framework.
you have to sit down and figure out, okay, what are we trying to get done here? Which are the
hmm
areas which we need to tackle first? And then again, we are streamlining our IIoT strategy journey in a fashion that UNS becomes that vehicle to get to those outcomes, right?
Right.
It's not a product as such, right? It's not to say here is the
It is
UNS.
not a product. It's not a
Yeah,
product. It's a framework, and that's the beauty of the framework. The framework has like certain things that are very, very, very clear. It has to be
yeah,
edge driven. It has to be lightweight. It has
yeah.
to be somewhat publish subscribe. It has to be event driven. It has to be asynchronous, and those kinds of things, right? So those are the things that were put out originally by Walker Reynolds, and then like obviously taken further by companies like HiveMQ and others. But it's a framework. So the way you implement it could be very, very different. And this is where I think like different companies have taken like different approaches, but all kind of like within the augurs of the framework or the core of what UNS is.
Right, right. Love that. Oh, perfect. Yeah, on this one now, Ravi, I mean, no surprise when people are getting closer to saying, okay, you know what, UNS is is our friend. Let's start to bring it into action. And the
hmm
first obstacle you hit is, oh, somebody outside of my control or my influence is holding on to that data, or we don't even know where that data is. Or,
Yes.
the other feeling might be of exasperation to say, okay, I have part of the data here and part we don't even know where exactly, right? So the data silos and fragmentation, I think, unsurprisingly, shows up as the first culprit in that journey, right? What you need to
Absolutely.
overcome, um,
Absolutely.
and the fact that the ability for data to move from some non-reliable, hard-to-reach locations within your environment, and this could be an oil well, this could be, there's just so much
Right.
out there in the industrial world which can be hard and tricky to bring in. And
Right.
doing all of that at scale, and as you can perhaps you catch my drift here, we are talking about the top 3 or 4 challenges here. This is what begins to show up as people are trying to say, okay, let's do this. Then they are hit
hmm
with these challenges. So, Ravi, any real life stories or examples you want to share around, how it's showing up in some of our
Yeah.
customers and also people you speak with?
Yeah. So when customers are considering UNS, right, one of the things that they talk about is, yes, I mean, we want to obviously start small, maybe start it at like one site, maybe bring all of the data relevant to that particular site, all of the systems together and see how we are able to benefit. But like big companies are also thinking about the bigger picture, right? Which means that, okay, so if I want to take this and roll it across, I don't know, 50 different sites and like 150 different systems and other things, then scale becomes a major factor, right? Meaning like you're quadrupling the number of connections, but at the same time, you want real-time data access. You don't want packets to be dropped. You want to be able to trust that information that you get. So you can say that yes, this is definitely real time. So I can actually have a digital twin. I know of my enterprise, and I can trust that. So those kinds of things, right? So you absolutely need that scalability becomes a very, very important thing, as important as like real-time data access and legacy system integration and things like that. Now, one of the other things that I missed to mention in the when we were talking about UNS is that it's not a magical pill, right? I mean, you cannot say you put UNS, then you're good. You don't have to do anything. It's just plug and play and things like that. It could be, but then the key thing about UNS is like it is like instead of you kind of creating your own custom connections from one system to another system, all you need to do is like plug it into the UNS. It's like a one-time thing, and then any new system that comes in, if you will, right, gets access to the existing systems with obviously all the security measures put in place. So it's that much more optimized, if you will, for your needs, and it grows organically in a very scalable fashion. That's kind of like those are the benefits that UNS brings. The outcomes really like helps customers out.
Yeah, love it.
Yep.
I'm going to just throw a link in the chat here because there's a lot of interest in, MQTT and UNS and how it comes together. So I've just provided a link. I would request if participants here have specific technical questions, we may not be able to get to those. Having said that, though, absolutely use the website contact us form to submit these queries. We'll get the right people to respond to you, and we'll be able to effectively also serve the broader audience which is on this meeting. So, Patrick, Jayant, if you don't mind, the best place will be to use the contact us. We'll try and throw in a link here. Much
Yep.
appreciated. And with that, yeah, I mean, this is again one of those interesting ones. And between the last year and this year, no surprise, AI and machine learning is pulling ahead, right? Significantly
Yes.
now.
Yes.
More than 60% of the respondents are saying, yeah, this is one of the biggest reasons why we want to um, invest into IIoT strategy. We want to
Hmm.
learn more about this so we can execute on the IIoT strategy. Edge computing and the ability to do real-time data processing in flight, ideally closest to the edge, is again one of the top three elements here. So
Right.
Ravi, let's talk about this, and let's definitely cover the idea of edge to cloud hybrid architectures. I do feel that maybe not everyone understands the power of this, right? If
Yes.
and
Hmm.
how edge to cloud hybrid architectures come to life, that can significantly up level your ability to do robotic process automation or other sort of
Yes.
real time event driven architectures.
Gen
But yeah,
AI,
I would
the
love
Gen
to hear. Yeah,
AI. Oh, yeah, yeah,
Gen AI
absolutely.
included. Yeah.
So I think like everything starts on the edge, right? I think edge computing, I would say in the last year or two has actually like really the technology has grown in leaps and bounds. The amount of things that you can do on the edge. So what is the edge, right? It's basically like a compute or a processing that can happen close to the source of truth. Like let's say you have a PLC, you have a subsystem that is doing stuff in the oil and gas in some remote oil and gas location, if you will, right? And you need some kind of like a some AI model that runs there to predict some failures that happens, if you will. And then once that prediction happens, you want to take a corrective action right then and there. You don't have time to actually send that information over to the enterprise or to the cloud, make a decision and come back. Right? That is impossible in this case. And that's why for that particular use case or those kinds of use cases, having a robust edge environment that can actually do a lot of the consolidation of the necessary data, do a lot of the like the processing there right then and there, and then only send information that is pertinent to the enterprise or to the cloud. That is kind of like the absolutely thing that we see. And this is where I think the edge to cloud hybrid architectures come in. And then that comes in the parlance of AI. Now, AI is becoming more and more distributed, meaning like when we talk about machine learning, AI for predictive analytics, gone are the times where we could only think about doing that on the cloud or the enterprise in high compute. You're able to distribute. You're able to create the or whatever models you need, if you will, right? You can create it on the enterprise or the cloud, and then you can deploy that to the edge, and then you can do a lot of the actual data gathering or processing on the edge, and then the outcomes could then go to the cloud, and then that could be combined with other information, and then they could be a more sophisticated model that acts on top of that. This is what we are talking about from the hybrid architecture perspective, where the information between the edge and the cloud are almost like 50-50% shared. And that is hugely benefiting a lot of customers. And with technologies like UNS, which are edge driven, really like AI, Gen AI, all the things that we're doing with AI is possible.
Yeah. So Ravi, I have a few questions waiting for us, but before we
Yes.
go to the questions, just one thing to point out: AR, VR technologies, and
Yes.
we've been hearing about this. I was perhaps out of sheer luck sitting front row when Satya Nadella he showcased the Microsoft HoloLens in 2016 at Microsoft Ignite in Toronto, Canada, and super amazing promise. They were showing off the GE wind turbine engine, and how people can look at that and interact with some of those sort of digital models or virtual models, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot has happened in the last year, right? We have Meta with its own glasses
Yep.
in conjunction with
All that.
Ray-Ban. Apple has launched Vision Pro.
Yeah.
Do you see this
Microsoft.
in for Microsoft has their own, I'm sure, journey that they are on. Snap has something going on. From a
Yep.
business technology perspective, where do you see people still thinking about this? Because clearly, right? I mean, it's still a factor, still a discussion point. More than
Yeah.
20% people think that they need to learn more
Yeah.
about how to
Yeah.
use this. Any thoughts
Yeah.
on this, Ravi?
Yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, when we think about this, I think there are very, very practical applications and use cases. Now, we talked about that yesterday, where I could have like a worker that's working in the kind of down in the trenches. They can actually have an AR, VR headset or some kind of like a device that can then like gather the information and then feed it back to somebody that is not there on site that can actually act as a support staff that is actually actively helping this person to be able to debug and things like that. So that is a very very common technology, and then you can actually like communicate with it and do a lot of things automated. So you don't have to like manually start doing things. So those are key use cases. But you and I, we did talk about the fact that the technology is there, but it's not quite mature yet. And that's why the number that we got for this is still low, because the adoption has been somewhat slow and the promise has not been as stark. But then, like, if you look at like things like AI, things like edge computing, it did have like a period where it was slow, but now it's really hockey stick, right? So it's just about in a matter of time before these technologies also catch up, in my opinion.
Right, Ravi. And that was exactly my point. Between last year and this year, in vision or augmented vision technologies,
Yes.
a lot
Hmm.
has happened, which means, to your point, right, we might see this hockey stick where,
Yes.
this year it's a lot of AI and perhaps the fact that you could do a lot of data processing on the edge, you can combine that with, peripherals, wearable peripherals,
Yeah.
and help deliver on some of these realities.
Right.
All right,
Right.
so let's go ahead, Ravi. If you don't mind, I'll just pick one question, which I think your perspective will
Yes,
be very
please.
helpful on. Somebody's asking Roberto. Roberto's question is: so where would one implement a UNS? Would it be in the broker, or do you recommend another software or a database?
Yeah.
What's our take on this?
Yeah. Now, there are multiple ways to implement UNS, right? I mean, we are not here to say that this is the only way to do it, but typically a UNS is well suited to be implemented in a broker. That's kind of like how we see it, because the reason is that a broker or MQTT in general is edge driven, right? It is pub sub. It is exception driven. So it has a lot of qualities already built into it. And then all you need to do on top is that data virtualization or contextualization. That contextualization layer doesn't really need to be on the broker. It could be a separate entity. But then ultimately, the actual UNS is something that we would recommend residing on a broker.
Perfect. And related to this, Roberto also asked, so are we saying that the node or the sort of end equipment is sending raw data? Um, And could the equipment start the UNS or part of the UNS? Could
Yes.
the equipment actually initiate the UNS?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And this is where edge computing really comes into play, right? The UNS can actually start right where the data is getting generated, like at the PLC level, at the sensor level, right? So because the tags are getting generated there, and all the consolidation and the translation of the data can happen right at the edge. And then that kind of like keeps going, depending on how complex your architecture is, it could go to the plant level, and then from the plant level to the enterprise level. So by the time it gets to the actual UNS, it is already cleansed, it's already ready to go, and all you need to do is consolidate that data with other pieces of information that you need.
Yeah.
So yes.
So Jose had a similar question, right? They were looking at, how does MQTT and OPC UA interplay? So Jose, I hope this answered that question as well. In case not, just let us know and we'll pick
Yeah.
it up after a couple of
Yeah.
slides.
So just on that
Yeah.
point, so OPC
Yes.
itself, if you look at OPC, OPC has implemented MQTT as a part of its pub sub. So they actually said that, hey, we are getting a lot of feedback on about the fact that we are a client server architecture, which is not ideal for getting data to the enterprise or to the cloud. So they actually have implemented a pub sub, and then that is happening through MQTT as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Ravi, we can keep moving now.
Yeah. So this is the next slide that
No,
talks about.
we
Oh,
had to
sorry,
be
sorry.
on
We came
12
back
now.
here. Yes, yes. Sorry. Yes, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So pulling ahead, right? We are now in the AI world, right? We are talking about uh, the the intention or the plan that our respondents have around using AI in their industrial use cases. Predictive
Mm-hmm.
maintenance is more
Yeah.
than 60%, right? Um,
Surprises. Yeah.
and we talked about processes, and reality is that anything businesses need to fix in the long run, implement in the long run, will have an impact on processes overall. So whether it's an element of your robotic process automation or process auto optimization overall, it's
Right.
showing up,
Right.
unsurprisingly.
Right.
Any comments on this, Ravi? Just based on
Yes.
again, what you're seeing in the
So
market.
real quick, right? At the end of the day, it's still kind of like the core functionality that you're trying to drive AI. Because I think like there is this fallacy that AI can kind of like solve everything under the sun, and it's the coolest kid on the block. It's really awesome. But guess what? Companies that are adopting AI are like struggling to figure out like what they are trying to use AI for. Is that really the use case that like AI can solve? If unless you actually are able to align the AI technology to a true use case that you have. Hey, I have equipments that are failing in the space in the failing in the field, right? And these are causing a lot of downtime, and then that is affecting my bottom line. So I need AI to run either on the enterprise or on the edge to be able to do that. So I can do predictive maintenance. I actually have an issue with my inventory management, or I have an issue with my process that I feel AI can optimize. Like you talked about vision systems, for example, right? Those vision systems are running, and I need AI to actually look at all the pictures that is generating and make decisions on the real time whether that particular product, that bag of chips that is going through, is it conforming to the standards that I set, so that I don't have to like throw away the batch at the end of the thing because I didn't catch it. Those are the kinds of things that you need to align AI, and that's where you really have success. Gaurav?
Just talking on mute. Ravi, I was gonna point out that the process capabilities here, thanks to
Mm-hmm.
AI, and I'm trying to find a mix between number three here, generative AI use cases and process optimization.
Sure.
To your point, you see a pack which is by assessment of the vision system, not to spec. What happens
Yes.
next? Right? You
Yes.
don't need a you didn't ideally you don't need a person there to say, okay, I'm gonna do something about this. It should be an
Automatic.
auto raise of a ticket, yeah, and that kicks off some other uh,
Mm-hmm.
you know action in the back end. That's the sort of true transformation that we're talking about. And I quite loved, Ravi, that you were in preparation for the webinar, you described to me the three pillars of digital transformation, right? We said
Mm-hmm.
people, process, and tools. So the
Yes.
tooling here is what we've been talking about, the UNS and the
Right.
protocols and whatnot. The
Mm-hmm.
processes we looked at, and the people, right? The leadership,
Yes.
and the sort of learning needed in the domain to make all of this happen. So it's all sort of coming together here. You can see where
Yep.
all the areas of impact will be when you get the three legs of the stool together, right?
Right, right, absolutely, and that's where I think generative AI, for example, right, using a large language model has become like so powerful to be able to like automate a lot of the things. Like in our demo platform, for example, if you remember, Gaurav, we have this interaction with Google Gemini, right?
Mhm.
Gemini can actually help you figure out like if I'm somebody that is coming into my shift and I want to know all of the alarms and alerts that have happened in my substation, right? Instead of me going to like 10 different systems and doing it, I can just ask a question to Gemini, and then it will basically give me all of the information that I need at my fingertips. And I can trust it because it's all real time. That's obviously powered by the UNS that like HiveMQ is driving. So that is important too. But then the outcome is also important. And these are the use cases where generative AI, specifically in manufacturing, becomes huge.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna try and find the link to the demo that you did, Ravi, on the platform
Yes.
with the Gemini AI. So I'll try and throw that link in the chat for our attendees today.
Yep.
Um, I think this one, Roberto, I just saw your question. Roberto is asking, AI sometimes can hallucinate and lie, right? So how do we minimize, or they're not using
Yeah.
that term. I'm gonna paraphrase. How do you minimize that risk? I think this slide sort of
Hmm.
alludes to it a little bit, right? The idea of data quality. What are the factors when we're asking our respondents? They're like, we don't trust the data, right? Or we don't know if we should be able to trust the data. And if it's
Right.
garbage in, garbage out, and in most cases, as Roberto is concerned, AI is going to make up something. So What happens in that case? I think it's still a question that's not been answered thoroughly enough by the current state of um technology available to us, Ravi. But
Hmm.
overall, though, the idea of data quality being so top of mind for the respondents, speak to me about this. What's going on here? And then again, what are the solutions available to up the data quality quotient?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, right. So this is the whole classic. Like, I want to do AI. I want to do AI. Management is pushing me to do AI. So, I, as an employee, like, I take this up half-heartedly, right? And now I see the outcomes, and it's complete garbage. What am I going to do? I'm going to like completely not do it anymore because I don't trust it. First of all, you're forcing me to do it. Secondly, like it's complete garbage. Now I'm just going to like stop using it. And that's why companies are struggling with seeing adoption of AI within the organization. Even though they did a lot of investment, it is getting stalled, right? And this is basically asking what are the factors that are impeding you from like adopting AI, taking that to the next level. One of the major things is data quality, right? And basically what it is like, if you get the data from something, even if the data is good, you don't understand where the data is coming from, your model is not going to know what to do with it, right? So you need to have that context of where the data is coming from. You need to make sure that the data is the right format, if you will. If for example, you're trying to do some AI modeling with of temperature, and it needs to be in Celsius and not in Kelvin. So that conversion needs to happen. Or if the temperature needs to be in certain range, that thing needs to happen, if you will, right? Or if you're bringing in this data points from multiple different systems, say 10 different historians and some MES systems and things like that, and you want to rationalize all of that to make sure that if I look at this data point, this is what it is. So those kinds of like rationalization of data, all of that is absolutely important. HiveMQ, for example, has a data hub module that does exactly that, where you're able to have some scripts that you can run, and then some of these things are automatically available. The common ones that we see, Gaurav, are available automatically, where you can just quickly apply and improve your data quality. That's one way to do it. There's a multiple ways to do it. At the end of the day, you want to be able to create a model that doesn't hallucinate, that doesn't like is not far from reality, is close to like what the truth is. And then of course it allows you to like keep learning from it, because that's the nature of the game when it comes to AI. It's all about learning. But for that learning to happen, good quality information needs to happen. And of course, you also need to have the people trained, because what's a what's the benefit of having all these AI models that if people, the consuming people, don't have information of how to consume it? So again, training needs to happen. I think where necessary, generative AI needs to come in so people can focus on things that are important for them. And of course, I mean, in preparation for that, you need to have data integrated from all of these different systems. We talked about how MQTT, HiveMQ, Edge can do that integration and create that UNS and allow you to have the data in the right format to be able to do all the modeling.
Yeah, I love it. I think Ravi, you have a visual which sort of brings it all together, at least architecturally, right, on a high level. So just
Yep.
please walk us through this, and I think it should clear the picture for a lot of our attendees today.
Yeah, exactly, right. So this whole thing is all about like this is kind of like this classic edge to cloud or edge to enterprise architecture, right? So where you have the sources of data, maybe a sensor or maybe a traffic light or a windmill or like an oil rig, if you will, or a machine or something in a factory, if you will, generating data, different kinds of data in different formats, different legacies. Maybe some of these machines are from the 1970s. Some of these are latest machines that are smart and have sensors and things like that. You need some kind of like an edge environment that can take all of this information, convert all of this information into a format that makes sense. In this case, convert it to into MQTT topics, if you will, rationalize all of this information where it makes sense, and bring it into the enterprise. And this is kind of like where you have this notion of this enterprise broker, where this is also where the UNS is running that can bring all of this information. And the broker needs to have like enough scalability built into it, because after all, this information can come from so many different edges, from so many different locations. It has to have the reliability in case the main broker goes offline, like a backup needs to take over, and that needs to be seamless. It has the notion of you have to be able to visualize the connections as it's happening. So some kind of a graphical user interface, and like a quality module. Again, it doesn't stop just with the edge, because the quality needs to be improved or things need to happen at every level. So the quality management, and this needs to kind of like run either on premise or on bare metal or on the cloud, right? And then typically these are like the cloud models could be like SaaS based, or it could be completely fully managed by HiveMQ or others. So this is kind of like what we see, and then of course how it connects to these different systems, right? Streaming applications like Kafka for other like Microsoft and other like Confluent, Kinesis for Amazon, PubSub for Google, for example, databases because databases need this information, and other applications, right? So treating that whole end-to-end ecosystem where data can flow from sensor to cloud and back. That's kind of like
Mhm.
what we're talking about here.
Yeah, love it. So, Ravi, let's tackle a couple of questions before we sort of summarize our learnings. One of the questions that Rob is
Mhm.
asking about, I think you mentioned a couple of slides back, starting small with a POC and then scaling to a larger system.
Yes.
So, how does it come to life from an architecture perspective? What does starting small mean? Because I think what Rob is thinking about perhaps is that it's an enterprise-wide endeavor. You know,
Yeah.
you get to a degree of agreement. Okay, what are we trying to get done here? And then you pick a piece of that. Is that
Yeah.
the way to go, or are we saying let's sort of
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
start
It all
early and
depends.
small with a certain other approach? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So it all depends. It all depends on like who is initiating the who is like initiating this whole thing, right? I mean, we talked about in previous slides, leadership kind of like in 25% of the case, the strategy is owned by leadership. 25% of the cases, it's owned by ITOT and like some other percentage for others, right? So if this project is like, hey, I have a pain point. I'm kind of like the OT engineer or the IT engineer. I have a pain point for which I feel having an IoT system within my factory location or my subsystem or my site would actually I'll benefit from that. Then I think like it starts like right there. It starts with a very, very simple setup of maybe a few sensor points, few machines connected, and a very simple kind of like an edge solution that is capturing all of this information. Maybe not too much edge processing, and then like a simplified version of a UNS, if you will. But the key thing is like how does that then scale from that, right? And this is where I think projects fail because that team is not able to then translate to how the rest of the organization will benefit. And this is where I think like coming top down from the leadership on like what we want to do, and then picking like a champion site where you want to start it, and then how that then scales will help, right? So kind of like figuring things out and then like showing the ROI. I think we talked about ROI as well. If you're able to show that I actually like through implementing this, I was able to reduce my downtime by like 10%, which led to like cost savings of like $2 million, for example, or some increase in revenue or decrease or improvement in operations that you can show monetarily, if you will, right? Those things then are able to easily translate to other locations because other locations also want a piece of that. But if you're not
Yeah.
able to prove ROI, that's kind of like where things get. So starting off with a proper goal and even if it's a very simple goal, and then like tracking KPIs towards that goal is the right way to go. That can then allow you to expand to other enterprise-wide applications.
No, love it, Ravi. In fact, and I believe Rob, just that's my assumption. Pardon me if I'm wrong. I believe you're based in Canada, and we have a Canadian tier one automotive company as a customer. They are exactly doing what Ravi described. Find a champion site, prove your ROI, and leave the door open for further upstream integrations and so on. And then other factories and other units in other countries are willing to take up the same model, and it begins to converge because we sort of started with the end in mind. You knew how it's going to all come together in the end.
Yeah.
I'm going to pick up something that Christian Ramones has mentioned, Ravi, and what Christian is talking about is
Hmm.
the possibility of UNS coming together with data mesh. And Christian, if you're seeing my screen here, I'm a big fan of data mesh. I have this book from Zamak. I was one of the early people to read up on data mesh, thankfully.
Yeah.
um, Big fan of the whole federations coming together for data management principle. It makes complete sense. Now I think where the lines begin to blur a little bit is that within UNS we are already talking about the idea of IT and OT systems coming together with a purpose, right? Organizing data, creating semantics, adding
Hmm.
context. Some pieces there will be very well informed by a data mesh philosophy. I
Mm.
surmise, not that we have seen any use cases to be transparent with you, but I don't know if everybody's calling it a data mesh. People have different data management strategies. People have different strategies around how are they persisting data, how are they replicating it. We have
Yeah.
use cases, and we are also integrating into the Snowflake cloud as example, and also
Absolutely.
Databricks, within
Yeah.
which, again, there's so many ways to organize data and do data management. My belief is something similar to the federation ideology methodology of data mesh is somewhere in that realm.
Yeah.
But yeah, hard to say definitively if we are seeing it exactly come to life this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. We also have like enterprise service buses, right? And I know that they are very prevalent in the IT world of things, where there's a lot of consolidation of IT-based data. And so we can actually complement that by providing that like a service bus similar to that on the OT side of things, right? Where the information coming from here can then be integrated with IT, and then you can have your own service bus that is doing things there as well. So we have seen that as well, right, Gaurav?
100%, Ravi. And it's interesting, right? The ESB in general, or a overall organizational middleware, that's probably one of the first things that an enterprise invests into. But then what
Hmm.
begins to happen is as they explore specific use cases,
Yep.
and let's call IIoT a use case. I know I'm wrong by a mile on this one, but just let's for the sake of this argument, just think of IIoT as a use case. That's where some of the limitations of the generic middleware begins to show. Case in point, depending on what protocols are the middleware built to support. Some of them are multi-protocol, I get that, but then as you go into more generic ways of supporting multiple protocols, you begin to make a lot of compromises. For example,
Hmm.
some of the more popular middleware will have MQTT support, but not MQTT5 support. And right
Yeah.
there, you begin to lose out on reporting by exception, a lot of message types. Quality of service 2 type is missing. And I'm saying a lot of these technical aspects here, so feel free to read these up. But every time you say, okay, this is optional and we may not need it, we cannot do it, you're essentially signing up for a future bereft of the advantages which were going to come on the back of a specification which has been built to operate in a very challenging kind of an environment. So I would resist the urge to plug everything into the ESB, or trying to push the ESB or the enterprise-wide middleware in this direction. The IIoT, IoT specialization that you need and the benefits that come from it, I think, again, UNS is a great example of showing what it can look like as you invest into a sort of um, a, 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 a deep compliance on all things MQTT. So yeah, with that
Absolutely.
said, I think we are almost out of time, Ravi. So I'm going to let you
Yeah.
finish us up
Yeah.
with the summary here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, quick summary, right? And I think all of these things we talked about, and I have a nice trends article that I wrote on LinkedIn, and I'll show like this. I'll show my LinkedIn profile. You can just scan it, and hopefully you can follow me and Gaurav on LinkedIn. So I have this trends where I'm kind of like covering all of these things in a lot of details about like edge computing, edge AI, data management aspects. I think we didn't even cover things like governance and security and things like that. Those are huge aspects of data management. Again, going with this whole people process tool, kind of like an analogy. So this would fall under the process side of things. We talked about the UNS, the framework. AI. I think I'll be if people kind of like have sore eyes with me saying AI, I'm sorry about that, but that's kind of like here to stay, right? And we have to like either live with it or die if we don't adopt it, literally, right? And with all this, IIoT implementation will only surge, and then you'll definitely unearth growing pains with that, and that's where companies like HiveMQ is there to help you, kind of like handhold you and get you along. So definitely look at my trends article on LinkedIn, and then yeah, this is kind of like where and Augustine will actually share the survey with all of you. But if you want to also get it, you can use this. Last but not least, yeah, please follow me and Gaurav on LinkedIn. We have a lot of good information we always post, and let's share some ideas. Let's continue this conversation on LinkedIn and other mediums, and let's keep learning from each other. That's all I had. Gaurav, any other things that you wanted to add before we close?
No, thank you for all you do, Ravi. I mean, you're out there pretty much every month. I'm seeing a lot of your content and your engagement with the industry. I think keep doing the
Right.
good stuff. And yeah, thank you to
Absolutely.
everybody who attended.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everybody.